Heavenly Stories.
The desert sun burned hot over Canaan, but in the fields where Jacob's sons worked, the air was heavier with tension than with heat. Joseph, the young dreamer, walked with an energy that set him apart from his brothers. His colorful robe shimmered in the light, a gift from his father that spoke louder than words. It was the robe of a favorite son. His brothers hated it. They hated the way their father's eyes softened whenever Joseph entered the room. They hated the way Joseph's dreams seemed to place him above them. And they hated the reminder that this boy, 17 years old, stood between them and their father's full affection. But Joseph was not one to hide his visions. One evening, while the family gathered, he said with excitement in his voice, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." The brothers' faces hardened. "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" Their voices cut like knives. But Joseph didn't stop there. Soon he told them another dream. "This time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing to me." Even Jacob, who loved Joseph dearly, was unsettled. "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually bow down to you?" But deep inside, Jacob wondered if there was something more to his son's visions. The brothers, however, only grew more bitter. Hatred took root in their hearts, and the robe Joseph wore seemed to mock them every time they looked at him. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers in the fields near Shechem. Joseph went willingly, unaware that this trip would change the course of his life forever. As his brothers saw him approach from a distance, the robe flashing like a banner, their hatred boiled over. "Here comes that dreamer," one of them sneered. "Let's kill him," another said. "We'll throw him into a pit and say a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest, tried to calm them. "Don't shed blood. Throw him into this cistern in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Secretly, Reuben planned to rescue Joseph later and bring him back to their father. But when Joseph reached them, their rage exploded. They tore off his robe, the very symbol of his father's love, and threw him into an empty pit. The walls echoed with his cries, but his brothers sat down to eat as though nothing had happened. It was then that a caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared on the horizon, their camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, heading down to Egypt. Judah spoke up, "What will we gain if we kill our brother? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." The others agreed. They pulled Joseph from the pit, ignoring his pleading eyes, and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. The traders tied his hands and led him away. The young dreamer, who once wore the robe of favor, now walked as a slave toward a foreign land. When Reuben returned to the pit and found it empty, he tore his clothes in despair. But the brothers had already prepared their deception. They dipped Joseph's robe in goat's blood and carried it to their father. Jacob held the garment and wept uncontrollably. "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him. Surely Joseph has been torn to pieces." His grief was so deep that no one could comfort him. Jacob refused to be consoled, saying, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." And so the house of Jacob was covered in sorrow. But far away, in chains and silence, Joseph was being carried toward Egypt. What seemed like betrayal and loss was only the beginning of a story far greater than anyone could imagine, a story of dreams, destiny, and the unthinkable power of forgiveness. The desert sand swallowed Joseph's cries as the caravan dragged him farther from home. With each step, the colorful robe of his past seemed more like a fading dream. By the time he reached Egypt, Joseph was just another slave in the market, a young Hebrew sold to the highest bidder. That highest bidder was Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard, a man of power and influence. Joseph stood before him with chains on his wrists, but behind his weary eyes burned something different: faith. Though torn from his family, betrayed, and stripped of everything, Joseph clung to the God of his fathers. And God was with him. In Potiphar's house, Joseph worked with diligence, honesty, and wisdom. Day after day, his hands brought order, his mind brought clarity, and his spirit brought favor. Potiphar noticed. Slowly, Joseph rose from slave to overseer. Potiphar trusted him so completely that he placed everything under Joseph's care, his household, his fields, even his finances. But with favor came danger. Potiphar's wife began to watch Joseph with eyes that burned not with hatred, but with desire. She cornered him often, her voice dripping with temptation, "Come to bed with me." Joseph refused. His answer was firm, his heart steady. "My master trusts me with everything. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a sin against God." Day after day she pursued him. Day after day he resisted. Until one moment changed everything. One afternoon, Joseph entered the house to do his work. No servants were inside. Suddenly, Potiphar's wife grabbed his cloak and whispered fiercely, "Come lie with me." Joseph tore himself free, leaving his cloak in her hands, and ran outside. Her desire twisted into rage. With the cloak as evidence, she screamed, accusing Joseph of assault. Potiphar returned home, and though his heart may have doubted her story, the charge was too great to ignore. Joseph, the faithful servant, was thrown into the king's prison. Once again, Joseph's life crumbled. From favorite son to slave. From overseer to prisoner. But still, God was with him. In the cold, dark prison, Joseph refused to surrender hope. The warden soon noticed the same thing Potiphar had: Joseph carried a presence greater than himself. He was placed in charge of the other prisoners. It was there Joseph met two men who once served Pharaoh, the cupbearer and the chief baker. Both had disturbing dreams one night, and both came to Joseph, troubled. Interpretations belong to God, Joseph told them. "Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer spoke first. "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. It budded, blossomed, and ripened into grapes. I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed it in his hand." Joseph's face lit up with certainty. "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will restore you to your position. You will place the cup in his hand again." Then Joseph added softly, "But when all goes well with you, remember me. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was stolen from my homeland, and I've done nothing to deserve these chains." The baker, encouraged, told his dream. "On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds were eating them." Joseph's expression grew solemn. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree. Birds will eat your flesh." And it happened just as Joseph said. 3 days later, Pharaoh celebrated his birthday. The cupbearer was restored, and the baker was executed. Yet the cupbearer, in his joy and freedom, forgot Joseph. Days turned into months. Months into years. The prison walls closed in, but Joseph's faith never broke. He clung to the belief that even in the darkest pit, his God was still writing the story. What Joseph didn't know was that the silence of waiting was only preparing the stage for the greatest turning point of his life, one dream away from destiny. 2 long years passed. 2 years of silence. 2 years of waiting in the darkness of Pharaoh's prison. Joseph had been forgotten by the cupbearer, abandoned by the very man he helped. Yet even in the stillness, God was weaving threads Joseph could not see. Then came the night Pharaoh himself dreamed 2 strange dreams that shook him to his core. In the first, 7 sleek and fat cows grazed by the Nile, only to be devoured by 7 ugly, gaunt cows. In the second, 7 healthy heads of grain were swallowed up by 7 thin, scorched ones. Pharaoh awoke disturbed, unable to sleep. At dawn he summoned his magicians and wise men. But not one could explain the meaning. Fear gripped Egypt's most powerful man, until the cupbearer suddenly remembered. His eyes widened as memory flooded back. "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings," he said to Pharaoh. "When you were angry with me and the baker, we were imprisoned. There was a young Hebrew there who interpreted our dreams. And everything happened exactly as he said." Pharaoh wasted no time. Joseph was hurriedly brought from the dungeon, shaved, given clean clothes, and led into the royal court. The young man who once wore a robe of many colors now stood before the ruler of the greatest empire of the time. Pharaoh's voice thundered, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I hear you can." Joseph bowed his head. "I cannot do it," he said humbly. "But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Pharaoh recounted his dreams, his words filled with unease. Joseph listened intently, then lifted his gaze. Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has revealed what he is about to do. The 7 fat cows and 7 healthy heads of grain are 7 years of abundance. The 7 gaunt cows and 7 scorched heads of grain are 7 years of famine. It will be severe, and it will consume the land. But God gave you the dream twice to confirm it, the matter has been firmly decided. A hush fell over the court. Then Joseph spoke again, his voice steady and full of wisdom. "Let Pharaoh appoint a discerning and wise man to oversee the land. During the 7 years of abundance, collect a fifth of the harvest. Store it in the cities, under Pharaoh's authority. It will be food for the people in the years of famine." The word struck Pharaoh like lightning. Who else could hold such wisdom? Who else carried such divine favor? He turned to his officials and declared, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" And just like that, Joseph's life was transformed. From prisoner to prime minister in a single day. Pharaoh placed his own signet ring on Joseph's hand, dressed him in robes of fine linen, and hung a gold chain around his neck. He gave him a chariot, second only to Pharaoh's, and commanded that people bow before him as he passed. Joseph was 30 years old. In the span of 13 years, he had gone from favored son to slave, from prisoner to ruler. Now he held Egypt's future in his hands. The years of abundance came, just as God had said. Under Joseph's careful oversight, Egypt stored grain in vast quantities, so much that it could no longer be measured. Then, when the years of famine struck, the land groaned under its weight. But Egypt had bread, and the world came to buy from Joseph. And so the boy once mocked for his dreams now stood as the man who made nations bow. Yet in Joseph's heart, the story was far from over. For somewhere in Canaan, his brothers, those who betrayed him, were facing hunger that would drive them straight into the path of the brother they once sold for silver. The stage was set for a reunion that would test the very limits of forgiveness. The famine stretched its cruel fingers across the earth. In Canaan, Jacob's household felt the gnawing of hunger. News spread that Egypt had grain, and Jacob turned to his sons. "Why just sit here, looking at each other?" he demanded. "I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy some so that we may live and not die." 10 brothers set out, leaving Benjamin, the youngest, Joseph's full brother, behind with their father, who feared losing him. With weary steps, the 10 approached Egypt, desperate men in search of bread. They were brought before the governor of the land, the man who controlled life and death in famine. They bowed low, their foreheads nearly touching the ground. They didn't know the face before them, the powerful ruler in fine linen. But Joseph knew them instantly. His heart thundered in his chest. The years melted away, the pit, the silver, the betrayal. Yet here they were, kneeling before him, just as his dreams had foretold. He could have revealed himself in that instant. He could have cried, "I am Joseph, your brother." But Joseph's story wasn't finished. Forgiveness was not cheap, it demanded truth, repentance, and transformation. So Joseph concealed his identity and spoke harshly through an interpreter. "Where do you come from?" he demanded. "From the land of Canaan," they answered, trembling. To buy food. You are spies. Joseph accused. You came to see where our land is unprotected. No, my lord, they pleaded. Your servants are honest men. We are 12 brothers, the sons of one man. The youngest is with our father, and one is no more. The words pierced Joseph's heart, one is no more. They had buried him in their memory as if he were dead. To test them, Joseph ordered them to bring Benjamin. He held Simeon as a prisoner and sent the others back with grain, secretly returning their silver in their sacks. Their journey home was filled with fear, fear of the governor, fear of God, fear of their past catching up with them. When Jacob learned that Benjamin was demanded, he refused. Joseph is gone. Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin? My gray head would go down to the grave in sorrow. But as the famine worsened, hunger pressed harder than fear. Judah stepped forward with a vow, send the boy with me. I will be surety for him. If I do not bring him back, I will bear the blame all my life. Reluctantly, Jacob let Benjamin go. With heavy hearts, the brothers returned to Egypt. When Joseph saw Benjamin, his eyes filled with tears. He excused himself and wept in private, then returned with composure. He ordered a feast for his brothers, seating them in birth order, something that left them astonished. And he sent Benjamin 5 times the portion. But Joseph wasn't done. He needed to know, had they changed? Or would they once again sacrifice a brother for their own survival? So he devised one final test. He secretly placed his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. As the brothers left the city, Joseph's steward overtook them. Why have you stolen my master's cup? He demanded. They protested, horrified. If any of us has it, he will die, and the rest of us will be slaves. The search began. Sack after sack was opened, until the cup was found in Benjamin's bag. The brothers tore their clothes in despair. Back before Joseph, Judah fell to his knees. His voice cracked with emotion, God has uncovered our guilt. Take me instead. Let the boy return to our father, or he will die of grief. I promise to protect him. Please, take me as your slave, but let Benjamin go free. It was in that moment Joseph saw it, the change he had longed to see. The same brothers who once sold him for silver now offered themselves in sacrifice to save another. Joseph's heart broke. The mask of the ruler could no longer hide the tears of a brother. The moment of truth had come. The room was heavy with silence. Judah's desperate plea still echoed against the stone walls, his words trembling with raw sacrifice, let me take Benjamin's place. Joseph could not hold back any longer. The years of pain, the years of silence, the years of hidden identity, all of it broke like a dam inside him. His chest heaved as tears blurred his vision. He turned from his brothers, his shoulders shaking, until at last he cried out in a voice that shook the palace. Have everyone leave me. Servants hurried out, leaving Joseph alone with the men who once betrayed him. He wept so loudly that even Pharaoh's household heard. And then, through sobs, he spoke words his brothers could not comprehend. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? They froze, stunned, their mouths open but silent. Terror raced through them. The ruler of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh, was the brother they had abandoned to slavery. What would he do to them now? Joseph stepped closer, tears streaming down his face. Come near to me, he said gently. I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. But do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years there has been famine in the land, and 5 more are coming. God sent me ahead to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. What they had meant for evil, God had used for good. The brothers fell before him, overwhelmed with guilt and wonder. But Joseph reached for them, embracing Benjamin first, weeping upon his neck. Then he kissed each of his brothers, his tears mingling with theirs. The years of hatred melted into reconciliation, and for the first time in decades, the family of Jacob began to breathe again. Pharaoh himself rejoiced at the news. He offered wagons and provisions to bring Joseph's entire family to Egypt. "Have no concern for your belongings," Pharaoh said, "for the best of all Egypt will be yours." When the brothers returned to Canaan with the news, Jacob could hardly believe them. His sons stood before him, saying, "Joseph is still alive. He is ruler of all Egypt." Jacob's heart nearly failed him, but when he saw the wagons Joseph had sent, his spirit revived. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." The journey to Egypt was long, but Jacob's hope carried him. At last, father and son met again. Joseph threw his arms around his father's neck and wept a long time. Jacob, overwhelmed, whispered, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Joseph arranged for his family to settle in the land of Goshen, the best pasture in Egypt. There, Jacob's household multiplied and thrived under Joseph's protection. The boy once cast aside now held the power to sustain the very family that rejected him. But the story of forgiveness was not over yet. For when Jacob's life drew to a close, the brothers' fears rose again. Would Joseph's mercy hold once their father was gone? Or would old wounds reopen and vengeance finally fall? The final test of forgiveness was still to come. The years in Egypt rolled on, and Jacob's family flourished under Joseph's care. But as Jacob grew old, he longed to bless his sons before death. Joseph brought his 2 children, Manasseh and Ephraim, before him. The old patriarch crossed his arms, placing his right hand on the younger Ephraim and his left on Manasseh. Joseph tried to correct him. "Father, this is the firstborn." But Jacob shook his head. "I know, my son. He too will become a people, but his younger brother will be greater." With that, he blessed Joseph's children, weaving them into the story of Israel's future. Soon after, Jacob called all his sons to his side. To each he gave words, some filled with warning, others with hope, but all shaping the destiny of the tribes to come. Then Jacob drew his last breath, and the man once called Israel joined his fathers in death. Grief covered Egypt. For 70 days, the nation mourned. Joseph, with Pharaoh's permission, carried his father's body back to Canaan. A great procession of chariots and horsemen accompanied him, and there, in the cave of Machpelah, Jacob was laid to rest beside Abraham and Isaac. When the funeral ended, silence fell among the brothers. Without their father's presence, fear gnawed at them. What if Joseph had only restrained his anger for Jacob's sake? What if vengeance had been waiting all along? They gathered together, trembling, and sent a message to Joseph. "Before your father died, he gave these instructions. Say to Joseph, I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and wrongs they committed in treating you so badly." Then they came in person, bowed before him, and said, "We are your slaves." Joseph's heart broke at the sight. After all the years, after all the mercy shown, his brothers still didn't believe his forgiveness was real. Tears ran down his face as he spoke the words that would echo through generations. "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." With those words, Joseph comforted them, speaking kindly to their hearts. He chose mercy over vengeance, love over bitterness. The boy once betrayed had become the man who forgave, teaching the world that forgiveness is stronger than betrayal and that God can turn even the deepest wounds into blessings. Joseph lived to see his children's children. As the years passed, he reminded his family of God's promise. One day, God will come to your aid and bring you up out of this land to the land he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Before his death, Joseph made them swear to carry his bones back to Canaan when that day came. And so, Joseph died in Egypt, but his hope lived on. His story became a beacon, a testimony that no betrayal, no pit, no prison could silence the power of faith, reconciliation, and forgiveness. For in Joseph's tears, the world saw God's mercy. And in Joseph's embrace, his brothers found what they least deserved but most desperately needed, grace.